Good morning. Hope everybody's ready for a good day. It's supposed to be nice and warm. And we're going to just try to wrap up Macbeth. A lot of what I'm going to do today, I think, is tie up loose ends. I hope that everything we have done up until now has made the play easier to understand. I hope that what we have done up to now has added to your enjoyment of the play. And as we go through this, I just hope that everything, that this presentation ties up a lot of loose ends. I'm going to warn you that you might hear my neighbor's motorcycle. I can certainly hear it now. You might hear neighbors to the other side of me. Their kids might be screaming and hollering, and you might hear my dishwasher, and I might all of a sudden gasp as my cat jumps up on my stomach. Okay? All of those things are entirely possible. I apologize in advance for any distractions you might come across. Quick reminder as I try to organize myself. Friday's the quiz, presentations by Chase and Aldo, and we start King Lear when we get back from break. And as I say here, if Othello didn't depress you enough, King Lear should take you over the top. On Monday, we talked about some great Shakespearean insults. The devil damn thee black, thou cream-faced loon. Once again, I think the idea of thou liest, thou shag-eared villain is awesome. The devil damn thee black, thou cream-faced loon is something else, that we are a sorrier society because we did not keep this language with us. And in fact, where gottest thou that goose look is pretty good as well. Also, go prick thy face and overred thy fear, thou lily-livered boy. Oh, calling somebody a lily-livered boy works for me. We still have lily-livered coward, but the whole sentence, I think, is really, really solid. Now, while I joke about the insults, I do think it's important to understand that these insults are showing that Macbeth is sinking, that he is giving into rage, that he is giving into anger, and that a lot of what he is doing is just reacting because he knows he's in trouble. He knows that everything he has built based on the witch's prophecies is about to fall apart. And so this anger and this rage and this lashing out at all of the people around him is a sign of that. It's part of the character development. It shows him falling apart. I wish we would keep the insults, but let's not forget that the character development here is key. I also talked about Machiavelli on Monday, and I can't believe I forgot this, but let's wrap this up as well. On page 1461 of the textbook, sensitive and imaginative, ruthless and power-hungry, he directs his own manly heroism, which is sometimes called virtue, or vitu, toward an ignoble evil end. Seeing that, and I think it's virtue, I probably typed it wrong. Seeing that reminded me of Machiavelli. Virtue in Machiavelli was the developed skill. It was skill that you could develop and master over time. And Machiavelli believed that the prince was always supposed to develop his virtue. But Machiavelli would also tell the prince that virtue alone is never enough. You have to be able to, fake the virtues. And the two terms aren't quite synonymous, but they certainly are cognates. But everybody also has some fortuna. Machiavelli would have argued that not everybody has the virtue, but everybody has the fortuna. And everybody has luck, and sometimes the luck runs hot, and sometimes the luck runs cold. For Machiavelli, it was the skill to take the virtue when it was running bad and hold on to it as long as you possibly hold on to the good as long as you possibly could, and master that bad luck and master the good luck as well. And let's be clear here. We've talked about misogyny in Shakespeare. Machiavelli tops the cake here. For my part, I consider that it is better to be adventurous than cautious, because fortune is a woman, and if you wish to keep her under, it is necessary to beat and ill use her. And it is seen that she allows herself to be mastered by the adventurous rather than those who go to work more coldly. She is therefore always a woman, like a lover of young men, because they are cautious, more violent with audacity to command her. I'm not going to defend Machiavelli's misogyny here, but I do think what Machiavelli talks about is exactly what Macbeth did. He tried to master fortune, but because the witches were playing him, his efforts to master fortune failed. And I think the idea of the tragedy, we talked about trying to control one's fate, trying to take hold of the world and have the world recognize you on your terms in one of the paper options. That's what Macbeth was trying to do. It's what Machiavelli urges people to do. And Shakespeare says that doesn't always work. Or at least it seems to me in this play, he says that doesn't always work. Which leads me to theme. We talked about this with Julius Caesar. I want to pick up some of the main ideas again. It's the main idea of a literary work. Works can have multiple themes. Theme should consider all of the literary elements. And remember that it applies to the readers, not the characters. So we're not going to use Macbeth's name. We're not going to use Lady Macbeth's name when we discuss the theme. I talked in that previous presentation, and I'll repeat. Look at the conflicts. Look at they're resolved. Look at the protagonist. What happens to the protagonist and why? How does the protagonist change? Does the protagonist change for good or ill? What prompts that change? If the protagonist changes for ill, what's the result of that in the final outcome of the play? And again, I want to repeat, theme is an observation about the subject. Theme should be stated in a complete sentence, and try to avoid cliches. I'll even resist the joke about avoiding cliches, and we'll stop right there. We've talked about several subjects in this play. We talked about good governance, what makes a good ruler, governmental legitimacy. We spent a lot of time Monday talking about that. I think we can talk about the natural consequences. I'll mention that in one of the quotations that's coming up. I think we have alluded to the idea of what makes somebody a good person, what constitutes noble character. Certainly, Lady Macbeth's sleepwalking scene talks about guilt. We've mentioned in class several times, why do good people behave badly? We're talking about, did Macbeth act on his own, or did he act because the witches prompted him to? Once again, we can talk about natural consequences. We'll certainly pick that up. The witches, fate and free will, loyalty, trust. Remember Duncan's line about there's no art to find the mind's construction in the face. All of that stuff seems to tie together. The most famous, earlier on the slide, talks about what happens to the protagonists. Look, the most famous conclusion in this play, I think, is Lady Macbeth. She who spent much of Act 1 dominating things, she who pushed Macbeth to, and for lack of a better phrase, man up, is now sleepwalking, is now looking at her hands. Here's a spot. She is acting almost like Macbeth about who would have thought the old man had so much blood in him. Remember, Macbeth was not going to look at the painted devil. And all the perfumes in Arabia will not sweeten this little hand. An echo or a rephrase of Macbeth, this hand's going to turn the ocean red. There's a total flip here. She seems to be totally and completely guilt-ridden. The doctor talks about he's unable to cure her. She has to cure herself. We'll talk about the nurse or the The woman watching with her, the same sort of thing. Then obviously we've got Macbeth. I am sick at heart. I have lived long enough. My way of life has fallen into the seer. And that which should accompany old age, as honor, love, obedience, troops of friends, I must not look to have, but in their stead curses not loud, but deep, mouth honor, breath, which poor heart would fain deny and dare not. When we talk about what he should look to have in old age, honor, love, obedience, troops of friends. If I can be permitted to play philosophy without a license again, those are things that are listed in Aristotle's version of happiness. Aristotle's version of fulfillment includes those as necessary elements of happiness. Aristotle also mentions in those same passages that happiness only occurs if one lives the whole life. King Priam of Troy, according to Aristotle, could not be called happy because of how his life ended, because of all of the trouble those last 10 years of his life. Macbeth cannot be happy because of how his life ends as well. Notice he's toughened up here, though. He is not going to be frightened anymore. He is walked in. He has made the conscious decision to keep walking all the way through. And so when we take a look at Macbeth, as I said Monday, there's kind of a 180. Macbeth kind of switches around completely. Lady Macbeth switches around completely. And he has forgot the taste of fears. But again, there's a trade-off. He is sick at heart. He doesn't have that which should accompany old age. He's got all the courage he would ever wanted, but he is supped full of horrors, and nothing's going to frighten him anymore. I think one of the questions this play asks, and remember that theme does not answer questions. Theme does not provide a moral. Theme does not preach a sermon. But I do think one of the questions this play asks is, how does one go from noble Macbeth to tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day to the last syllable of recorded time. And all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out, brief candle, life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. I think that as one thinks about the theme, one has to think about Macbeth's character arc, how Macbeth began from noble Macbeth to the person who was steeped in blood so far that he had to just keep going because turning around would be as tedious as keeping walking, to the person who has supped so full of horrors nothing can startle him, to the person who now says life is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. How does one get to those points? That, I think, is what Shakespeare does extremely well in this play. You don't need the witches, okay? You don't need anything like that to make this work. The answer to that question, and I don't think Shakespeare provides an answer, but he makes us look at one person who made that journey and the results of that. That question, I think, is key to discussing theme. I've talked in other classes, and I don't know if I've mentioned it here, sometimes theme is stated. And one of the themes is, knots had all spent where our desires got without content. And the second half of that as well. 'Tis safer to be that which we destroy than by destruction dwell in doubtful joy. If you look at Lady Macbeth, that truth certainly is there. She would have been much safer and much more sane at the end of the play. The gentlewoman. I think it's important to look at this gentlewoman as the audience and giving the idea of the audience and what the audience should be feeling. I would not have such a heart in my bosom for the dignity of the whole body. In other words, wouldn't trade my soul for the kingdom of Scotland. And perhaps there's an optimistic element to the play. I'm not sure. And perhaps it's also wishful thinking on Malcolm's part, even though he has a happy ending. But the night is long that never finds the day. You know, we've heard, I believe it was Martin Luther King who originally said it, that the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. This is a Shakespearean way, I think, of saying the same thing. Daily writing, very, very simple. What's a possible theme of Macbeth? Once again, please remember the quiz is Friday, and I hope everybody has a good couple of days, and we'll see you on Friday.